What happens when your startup gets into the world's top accelerator but doesn't survive? What do you do when you hit 50,000 users and it's still not enough? What if you raised millions but started to feel like it was all going in the wrong direction? This is Robert, co-founder of Nook, a blue-collar job marketplace built in Vietnam. He built something real, made an impact, raised big, and had to walk away. This is a story of how it started and how it fell apart.
My biggest regret was probably not pivoting sooner. The biggest thing that kills startups is really not like running out of money. Like, it's easy to get money. It's hard to stay motivated. And that motivation has to come from inside. Too often, founders ground themselves to valuations too early. This fancy big name investor wants to talk to me, lowly me. And so you prepare, you over prepare, and you're not actually doing what you should be doing, which is talking to your customers and writing code. When you start to hire people for your own startup, they're making a career bet on you. It gets really, really tough. Nothing kills a startup more than no traction. And so we were getting a lot of traction. If you're seeing traction, you're seeing user growth, you're seeing revenue growth. That was what caused us to feel like, wow, we're actually moving and we're doing stuff. There's no shame in failing. It's really admirable that you went out there and took a risk. But in that moment, it doesn't feel like that at all. It's your baby. And if someone calls your baby ugly, you take it very personal because the startup is very personal.
What is one piece of advice that you would give to a founder who is struggling?
The biggest piece of advice for people in that situation is to realize that
Robert, welcome to Founders in Motion.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here today.
I'm very excited for today. Can you walk us through the early days of how it all started?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the intro. It all started actually when I was still back in school. I was studying for my MBA halfway through my program at HBS, and I was trying to figure out what to do over the summer. I had known since getting into business school that building a startup in Vietnam would be a dream. And I wasn't exactly sure what exactly I would build, who I would build it with, and more importantly, who I would build it for.
Yeah.
And what I realized was that there's no better way to get started than to get started. And so I just dived right in.
I love that.
Told everyone in my section, in my class, hey, let's move to Vietnam. Let's go and try to do something. And so the early days of Nook was really very much grounded in the Harvard Innovation Lab. We had joined this program over the fall and spring semester to try and iterate on a couple ideas. In the summertime, instead of taking a internship, we would go out there and get funding from the Rock Summer Fellows program, which was like an accelerator within the school. They give you a small stipend to go and try and build something. Tia, I was so excited because my two closest friends decided to join me on this adventure. And the early days of Nook was really very much hey, let's try and iterate on what sort of problems that existed in Vietnam. And that ranged from everything from EV to construction to building a CRM.
The whole gamut, right?
Exactly. The whole gamut of potential problem space. And we landed on building out actually at first a copycat idea. We figured for the summertime, we could build home renovations, specifically stuff that we saw in the US. At that time, it was called block renovation. And these startups in the US were taking off. They had raised tons of money. We saw copycat clones in China. And we figured if we brought those exact same things to Vietnam, we'd be successful. And so I told my parents, yo, I'm going to go to Vietnam to go renovate bathrooms.
Love
And
that. Great conversation to have with your parents.
exactly. My parents were like, you're going to go work on a steel? I was like, what? So we decided to move to Vietnam to work on this copycat idea in the home renovation space. And we would follow the same playbook in the US, which was start with the bathroom, the most complicated space, and then expand to the kitchen and then all parts of the home. Because the rest of the home is less complicated. It's a lot cheaper to do. And then you have more styles and designs. And we quickly realized that actually this was not going to work out. This was really, really difficult to do well. And in Vietnam, China, they actually built out houses with partitions already in there. And it's definitely not like in the US where there was a lot of old builds, and then you have to go and renovate them. In Vietnam, a
Yeah.
lot of things are just built brand new. And so for about a year, our idea, we just totally failed. And we pivoted actually into something that we realized we had to build. We had to build a construction marketplace in order to build our home renovations. So like what that meant is that for my startup, originally the idea was a copycat clone of stuff that was happening in the US. We
Yeah.
had modular home designs, kind of like IKEA. And once you actually did do those modular designs, actually you realize the bathrooms in Vietnam are actually really different. The plumbing's really different. And when you look at the schematics of what the home builders have to do, um, it's actually not fully up to date. And so we had to
Yeah.
do like way more work than we actually did. But the underlying job marketplace, the team of people that we would call up to go and actually execute the build out, those folks, we were like, wait, wow, they are working like a 380K job, backbreaking role, and
Yeah. And
they're laid off at any moment. Why don't we do something for them instead?
yeah, and I think for context for anyone listening, 180K VND is about 15 US dollars. So very, very little.
It's super tough. They're traveling far
Yeah.
from Ho Chi Minh City. They have to spend the night in the city to like make sure that the construction job is done well, and they get paid once a week. Oftentimes, the largest contractors are the ones that don't pay. And so you get into problems when the contractor's like, no, you didn't show up to work today. I don't think the quality was really good. I think we need to, delay payments because our investors didn't come in on time. These things
Yeah.
suck for those workers. And we realized, like, actually, when our workers weren't working for us, they were taking on these other challenges and realized that maybe we could do something here. We had a huge list of workers already. Why not go and try and serve this market instead?
Yeah. So, okay, a year in, had this idea and had this amazing pivot, and then moving to blue collar marketplace. How did you tackle that?
Yeah, so at first we were like, obviously we just needed to build an app, and these blue collar workers could use our app to understand how to level up their construction, building skills, their painting skills, flooring skills, and many electrical skills. We could do all these like really cool things and upskill them using like TikTok like short form video interfaces.
Yeah.
And of course, how naive we were. We didn't actually talk to our customers. We didn't actually get to understand their pain points. And instead, we built this app that no one really wanted. It was like, your typical CRUD app that had like a really great interface. When you think about where Vietnamese people were actually finding jobs, it was through their network, it was through referrals, it was through Facebook groups. And in fact, it was even through Zalo groups. When we realized that actually a lot of the workers were already using tools like social media or Zalo groups to find jobs, we could actually go to where they were. And we started to buy up Facebook groups. We started to buy up Zalo groups. And that's how we got our head start into this blue collar marketplace.
Yeah. So speaking of getting your head start into this blue collar marketplace, so you hit some pretty big milestones quite early on with this blue collar job marketplace evolution. You've hit 50,000 users in very short amount of time. What do you think constitute to being able to gain so much traction early on?
Yeah, I think it was just growth hacking. We realized that if we bought up those Facebook groups, we could quickly consolidate them together in order to have a bigger Facebook group. When we became admins of those groups, we were the ones that were approving or denying their like new job postings. And in fact, we would then be able to move those job postings from this bigger Facebook into our proprietary app. But we actually realized that like maintaining that Facebook group was super important for us. Having that community of like workers and listening, having our ears to the ground on what was happening, I think that was a big part of it. And I think another big part of it was just like being able to realize like, hey, actually sometimes they're not looking for jobs. They're looking to buy materials. They're looking to level up and skill up on certain like parts of their jobs, or they're just looking for like a good place to eat nearby. Like you start to learn like all these different like intricacies into like how they think, what they do. And we started to consolidate all those learnings together. And I think that was how we were able to quickly grow the active users on our platform.
And even though you got all these Facebook groups, all these Zalo groups, and a ton of your users, I guess like what was some moments or some key points where you started to feel like there might be something wrong here, or there might be something that is not going the best.
Yeah, so I think a big part of it was really thinking through the business model and profitability.
Mm,
I think I'd
yeah.
always figured like, hey, if we can grow this thing really quickly, we can figure out the monetization later.
Mm,
So we can get all those workers onto our platform, then we would be able to have leverage when talking to the other side of the network, the demand side. And what we realized was that it was not as easy as that. I think the culture, there's a lot of extra costs that we weren't like considering. For example, when we were trying to get workers to show up to construction sites, many of them didn't even show up. We were like, what's going on? Oh, yeah, my uncle is feeling sick. I need to go back to the hometown. Or, hey, sorry, my kid is sick today and I need to go back. Like, there are excuses, excuses, excuses.
yeah.
And I remember one time, like, I was like, okay, well, let me just talk to them. Let's try to figure out what's going on. And it fell flat, did
Mm,
not even want to talk to me. The guy hung up. And I was like, wow, this is a very different working culture. And you realize it's actually like, well, these construction workers, like, they think that sometimes when something's too good to be true, it could be a scam. It is something that they've never heard of, like this like
mm,
matchmaking service. Like there's all these extra things that we hadn't even considered. Like even when I think about their understanding of the internet, it was no more than Facebook and Zallo.
yeah.
And so being able to unpack all those different things, this supply side that we were working with was actually a group of like team leaders. And so we started working with like one tech savvy person in a village who would brand up his cousins, his uncle, and his neighbors to come to the big city and work. And then he would manage the payments. And we're like, great, let's create some like payment and team management tools for this guy. And all these extra hidden costs in dealing with businesses, because then he wants a cut that's a little bit more than the rest of his teammates. The middleman wants this, the middleman wants this. And so very soon we realized that we could keep on building what we wanted to build, but the margins were getting lower and lower. And
Mm,
so when I think about like what ultimately led to our downfall was the number of hidden cost and profitability issues. I never thought that we'd work in a field that I had no expertise in a market I had no expertise in a language that I'm like only semi comfortable speaking and working in a professional setting in. It was really tough. It was honestly really, really tough. And so maybe that's when the first inkling was there. And my biggest regret was probably not pivoting sooner. Although I look back on my time fondly because I know that we were able to make a huge difference and bring lots of jobs, upskill my team that I'm still super proud of, and be able to have this amazing like adventure. Like sometimes I think back and we have all the old phone numbers. We still get voicemails that are like, hey, like, where are you guys? Like, I still need a job, guys. Like, I still need help. Like, oh, thank you for doing this. Do you have more jobs for me? And when you see those customers' messages and you're like, wow, I let them down. That sucks.
I mean, I don't think you should think about it like that, right? I think you should think about the positive in terms of like what you have done throughout your time with Nook for them. And I think it's very similar. Like I had a similar experience where like I wanted to build a company over the summer and then I was expecting it to go very awesomely well, but it never really truly happens like that. And but one of the fondest memories I have is like meeting customers and them just being like, "Oh, I'm so glad you're building this. Like I've been struggling. Like I was building something for physical therapy for people that suffer from runner's knee." And it was like, "Oh, like I'm so glad someone's like thinking of us, like thinking of building something that I've been struggling with for 20 years." And that's always the most beautiful and fondest memory that you can think upon. And I wanted to touch on the investor side of things. So Nook was valued at $20 million. dollars. That's a huge valuation for Southeast Asia and how early you guys were. Like, did the big number and the big value around it affect the way that you make decision early on?
No, I think that too often founders ground themselves to valuations too early. Of course, you don't want to have like too low of a valuation so that in future rounds you don't have enough equity to stay motivated. But when you look at like what we learn in YC, the average like siege stage valuation, like you said, in Vietnam or Southeast Asia, it's pretty low. It's probably closer to like 4 or 5 million on average. And
Wow.
the top end of that market is maybe like 10 million. At
Oh.
YC, the way that they like taught us to think about this is like, hey, just get the money you need and just keep going on. And their
Yeah.
advice to almost all the folks in the batch is to go out there and raise between 15 to 25 million. And many startups were able to do that. We got right in the middle. Like we just kind of randomly pick a number and you're saying like, hey, this is my valuation. Do you want in or out?
If you don't
And
fight
I think
back, this is my evaluation.
yeah, exactly. Like you pick a number and just go with it. If it doesn't work, then just move down or move up if there's too much interest. But like people overthink a lot of these valuation things. And I think
Yeah.
we had the same like approach with Vietnam, and we said like, oh no, we should start with the like average of 5 million. We probably would have raised at 5 million, right? The thing is that like we raised a lot of our capital from US investors. And so we just picked a number and we just went with it. And we didn't spend that much time fundraising because when you're fundraising, investors are looking at you, examining all parts of what you're doing, and you're like, oh my God, like this fancy big name investor wants to talk to me, lowly me. Like, that's amazing. And so you like prepare, you over prepare, and you're not actually doing what you should be doing, which is talking to your customers and like writing code. The reality is that a startup is really all about the basics, which is talking to customers, figuring out what they want, and then building it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think being on the other side of things, having those conversations with startups, it's the fundraising process can take a really long time. And it really hinders your progress to build and continue like expanding your customer base, to talk to your customer more frequently. And sometimes that can be the crux of the business because you lose out on like months of runway, which sometimes can be very valuable, especially if you're a little bit cash constrained. I also wanted to touch on your mental state. So you mentioned that like maybe after a couple while of pivoting and then not being super familiar with the construction space before, it really took a toll on the team and yourself a little bit. Like, could you walk me through how were you feeling and how were you and your co-founder kind of having those tough conversations?
Totally. So I remember actually we were feeling pretty low the fall semester after we left business school. You see,
Mm.
Nathaniel and I, my old co-founder, we were trying to get this thing up and running, and we didn't know how to make it work. One, we were still in like COVID lockdown, and instead of being in Vietnam, we were stuck in Thailand. We couldn't get our visa to the country. Two, we couldn't actually go and touch our customers. They're in another country, they're in lockdown. No one wanted to do anything. Like it was really tough. We were in total lockdown. That mental state at the very beginning um, caused me to be very aware of like what external validation can do to you. Right? Because then
Mm.
when we got into YC, like months later, it was like, wow, we feel great. Everyone's telling us like, wow, Robert, like Nathaniel, you guys are geniuses. Like you guys are so smart. How are you guys doing all this stuff? And you quickly realize like actually like, hey, no, it was like we're always just doing our thing. And stuff like YC is really like just that external validation that made us feel more confident in what we were doing. But otherwise we were always doing the same thing. I think the
Yeah.
other part of it is that like YC always says this, but it's like, nothing kills a start more than like no traction. And so we were getting a lot of traction. But
Mhm.
if you're seeing traction, you're seeing user growth, you're seeing revenue growth. It's like everyone's excited all of a sudden. And I think that when we were getting user growth, market growth, that was really exciting for us.
Yeah.
That was what caused us to feel like, wow, we're actually moving and we're doing stuff. And everyone feel that momentum. The biggest problem was when we were hitting that point where we're thinking through like our burn rate, profitability, our margin, everything that we were talking about earlier. And we were like, wait, this doesn't make sense. I don't know how to like fix this thing. And when things become like, I don't know how to fix this thing, to oh, this is a really tough challenge, right? That's different framing. Problem is when you have no idea where to start. And challenges are like, I know exactly what to do. It's just really, really hard to do it.
Yeah.
That's what really changed our mindset to like, okay, this is doom and gloom, and we're not on the right path. And me and my co-founder had to really rethink things. And then I think the final nail in the coffin was when, not to blame my co-founder at all, but he took a really long medical leave. And
Mm.
I think that like final piece was just like, a lot to manage all at the same time, that there was
Yeah.
no traction. That's the biggest symptom. Two, building a startup is all about doing it with the people. And if my co-founder was not able to be with me, I think that was a big part of it. It was like, oh, I don't want to do this alone, actually. Which is a big reason why I think YC always says like you need co-founders in order to build stuff. Building
Yeah.
startups is super lonely. And that's probably the
Yeah.
final piece of the mindset that I wanted to share is that like, being able to find your community. Your first and foremost community is your co-founder and your team, but I also made sure to like bring in other like founders and we would meet up and we would like do stuff together or like share tips and tricks. So that's the other final piece of the mindset that I think about as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think this resonates with so many founders out there, especially solo founders, because it can just get really overwhelming and very lonely when you can't share what you're even thinking or what you're dreaming of the business for anyone. And
Yeah.
having that camaraderie is actually so important. And what is one piece of advice that you would give to a founder who is struggling or is kind of in the stage where they don't know if they should pivot or if they should shut things down?
I think that the biggest piece of advice for people in that situation where they're not sure if they should shut down, keep going, is to realize that, like, if you keep pushing on what you're working on, you keep staying alive, you act like a cockroach, right? Like, you cannot get rid of you. Like, you're going to do something great. Like, that's the thing is that, like, the biggest thing that kills startups is really not like running out of money. Like, it's easy to get money. It's hard to stay motivated.
Yeah.
And that motivation has to come from inside.
Mm.
If you want to pivot, if you want to stick with what you're working, like what's best for your business, but it's easy to say like I've had enough. Like I miss my old corporate job. I miss being able to just think from 8 to 6 and not stress out about everything that's going on. That's an easy path to go forward. But being a founder means that you're constantly thinking about all these different things. You're constantly thinking about how you come off, how you sell, and it's one of the most rewarding things you can do. You are a founder because you love learning. You love being able to adapt to new problems and so dynamic. And there's a
Yeah.
lot on your plate. Yeah, absolutely. But you're a founder because you really want to make a difference. And that when you're building startups, that's the fastest way to learn. That's the fastest way for you to grow. And so no matter what you do afterwards, like you're going to take those learnings, you're going to take that growth and you're going to apply it towards your next venture or back in the corporate world. And I think that ownership, that scrappy, resourceful mindset that I've cultivated over the past 4 years, I think that's probably like, one of the biggest mindset shifts that I've had. But the most rewarding thing, like you said earlier, is really the impact you're able to make. And that's from my customers, my team, and of course, everyone around me. And so that would be my one piece of advice is just to listen to yourself and just keep going. You know what's best for you. And that mindset, your persistence, it's what got you here in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so beautiful and definitely so true. Like when you're a founder, you feel the highs very well, but you also feel a lot of lows, and sometimes the lows can get very overwhelming. I will also add that not everyone wants to be a founder, and that's totally okay. Like it's totally normal to want to go back to having a job because you don't have to think about it in the weekend and you can actually like have fun and live a carefree life. So I think it's really a personal choice.
So after Nook, I decided to have another swing at the whole startup game. It's kind of like what you said, being a founder is not for everyone, and that's okay. For me, I realized I love being able to take on big challenges like this. And I found a new co-founder to do it with, Oscar. He's amazing. What Reforge Labs does is we build performance marketing agents. So think of all the advertising that you see on TikTok, Facebook. There's a marketer behind all these ads, and they're not super excited to do all the data heavy part of their job. And that data heavy part of their job is something that AI is really good at doing. So we've decided to create a AI data analyst that can go and sift through all the performance marketing data for them. So whether that's like creative insights, creative research, data crunching of the reports, we do it all.
That's super cool. And I just have to know. So investors love founders that make them a lot of money. But so when you told investors, you told IC and you told everyone about your past failures and how you might have lost them a tad bit of money, how did they react?
Ooh, that's a great question. How do people react in the face of failure? I think like one thing to note is that for VC, most startups do not make it.
Yeah.
In fact, it's almost built into the model where like, hey, if one of them hits a unicorn or a decacorn, or I guess like a $4 trillion company nowadays, that's the goal. You really don't want your portfolio companies to just pass it and kind of return something, because that's also not a win for them either.
Yeah.
And so I think that what's really important about investor management is just being really clear and transparent with your communication. No one cares that you failed except yourself and the people that didn't have a ton of money to invest into you but did anyways. That's really bad. Don't do that. You want sophisticated investors.
Yeah.
So I think that, the biggest thing is just being able to have really great communication with your investors and keep them in the loop on what's happening so that you don't surprise anyone. And having that clear communication on like, okay, this is the status update. This is the monthly update. This is the quarterly update. Like, it doesn't surprise anyone at that point in time.
When you had to relay the story of how you built this great company, you spent 2.5 years, 3 years building it, and it ultimately closed down to everyone. Like, I guess, like, what was that process? Like, did it just come out of the top of your tongue, or like, how did you mentally prepare yourself to deliver such a hard part of your story?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things was letting the team know that, hey, we're probably not moving forward with this idea.
Yeah.
It's really hard to tell your customers, hey, we're no longer able to provide this service. Those promises that we made you, we're not going to be able to uphold them. And I would say that that's way harder than communicating to investors or even to like your friends and family that like the big career risk that you made is not going to pay off.
Yeah.
You have to realize that like when you start to hire people for your own startup, you grew to like dozens of employees, they're making a career bet on you.
Yeah.
When they put their entire career worth on you and what you hope to achieve, it gets really, really tough because, like it or not, future employers will look back and be like, what is this random experience that you've had? What are you doing for like a year or two? And I would say that, like, my co-founder, Nathaniel, he talks a lot about how his dad handles letting patients know that they have cancer or they're not going to make it.
Yeah.
And it always starts off with just like acknowledging, recognizing what's happened, and then just going straight forward, like no beating around the bushes.
Yeah.
That was the way that we decided to communicate with our team, with customers, that, hey, this is what's happened. We're not going to try and sugarcoat it because no amount of flattery is going to change what's happening, but offer a way forward. And so we focus on helping to get people the support they need, the advice they need, the recommendation or referral they needed so that they can find their next job, so that our customers can start to move forward and start to plan for an alternative. So that was really important for us to handle. And it was a really delicate situation. There's no shame in failing. It's really admirable that you went out there and took a risk. But in that moment, it doesn't feel like that at all. It doesn't feel like that at all. You take it very personal because the startup is very personal. And
It
so
is
I
your
would say
baby,
that
right?
it's your baby. And if someone calls your baby ugly, as much as you want to bring the scientific lens to it, it's hard to divorce that.
Yeah. One final question. What's the number one piece of advice that really shaped your founder journey?
I think that the number one advice, there's so much good advice that I could give, but the number one advice I would say is to carefully pick your co-founders. I picked someone that did not have complementary skill sets, that did not have domain market expertise, and like definitely did not know he wanted to even be a founder. All those things made it tough, yes, of course, but he was ultimately the right co-founder to join the team because Nathaniel was able to inspire me in moments of gloom and doom, be able to help me think through and strategize. And really, we were just people that got along. And I think that goes a long way to figure out who's the right co-founder, because at the end of the day, a co-founder is going to be there with you thick and thin. And Now with my current startup and Reforged Labs with Oscar, like he's such a great communicator, super empathetic, and we're both able to like recognize like, oh, this is starting to trigger the other person, or like, hey, actually, I need to cover for them because something is happening here and there. Your co-founder really shapes your experience, whether that's success or failure. Your co-founder is always going to be there with you.
Yeah, and I can totally relate to that, because I think one of the main reasons why the startup that I was trying to do over the summer didn't go so well is because I was with a co-founding team that we just did not align at all. We did not see anything eye to eye, and that is the most painful thing that could happen. But I just want to say, like, thank you, Robert, for being just so open and candid about sharing about a story that did not have a super happy ending, because I think a lot of people just focus on success, focus on fundraising, focus on all the, like you mentioned, external validations, but so much of the startup journey is how you overcome these very hard challenges and how do you push yourself forward and what you really learned from it. And I've learned so much from you today.
I know a lot of this topic today was, like you said, not on the success, but more on the failure and personal growth side. And I have to say, like, one of the biggest things about building a startup is just building that emotional maturity. And
Yeah.
the person you spend all of your time with, it's going to be your team. And having the right co-founder, the right team, all of that really makes that experience like 10 times better or 10 times worse, depending on
Yes.
how you guys gel.
So that episode was slightly different. If you're interested in everything, challenges, struggles, and everything in between, do let us know. And if you have any of your own, you should drop them down in the comments. I would love to hear any of them. And if you're interested to hear more early stage founder stories, you can check them out here. And you should subscribe to the channel because it helps us deliver stories to people like you. Okay, bye for now.